Okay, so thanks a lot for staying in station 4, because I guess fast fashion is a bit more sexy than what I'm going to talk about, which is data. But I thought it's really, when I saw the title Cash, I thought I really have to come here and talk about data regulation. And even though it sounds nerdy, I hope that at the end of our conversation, and I would love for you also to ask questions if you have any, that you feel it's not so nerdy, but actually quite relevant for our whole economy and quite the core actually of cash, if you want. So maybe just a couple words to myself. I, in my past, studied philosophy and economics, which was not very helpful, but anyways, I think there's a former student with me here as well somewhere. And then I went to consulting, and then I started a pro-European movement, a pan-European movement, because I saw all these right-wing nationalists rising, and I felt that we have to do something against it. And so a French woman and an Italian man, myself, started a movement called Volt, and I'm happy to tell you all about it, but not in this session. Then I got elected into the European Parliament in 2019, and there I'm working on a range of issues from migration, asylum, and to constitutional affairs, how to fix the European Union. But I also wanted to show that our movement is really innovation friendly and that we care about digitalization. So I also wanted to work in this field. And in the European Union, there are 5 core laws when it comes to the digital sphere right now. Let's see, do you know any of them? DSA, Digital Services Act, great. Another one? DMA, exactly, Digital Markets Act, which regulates the gatekeepers, the evil big ones. These are all acts, these 2 specifically, that try to fix an issue that we already have, which is a market concentration in the field, especially from B2C, so to consumers. But there are a couple of more. The last one is actually quite famous right now because of ChatGPT. So what could that be? AI Act, exactly. So AI Act is a bit of a failed attempt, I could say. I think it's still very good that we have it. But the whole idea of the AI Act was that you basically regulate by if you want, infringement on fundamental rights. So your Spotify algorithm wouldn't be regulated because it's really annoying to get folk songs instead of pop, but it's not infringement on your fundamental right if you get that. Whereas obviously if you go higher up the chain, HR algorithms or even automated weapon systems, then maybe regulation might be more useful. ChatGPT created a bit of an issue because it's a general purpose AI. It can be used for everything, so they don't really know where to put it. But we're negotiating this right now. And that brings us to the 2 laws that I'm negotiating and that nobody knows. Hey, Data Act, thank you. And the last one, do you know it as well? Exactly, the Data Governance Act. And before I go into this, I want to give you a bit of an example of what we're actually talking about. So, normally when you buy a laundry machine, it's a really annoying exercise, no? Because you buy it, then you put it in your car, it's quite heavy, then you try to get it up, or you get someone to do it for you, and then you put it in your house, and you're pretty certain that you own it. And I think this was true for a long, long time, but now laundry machines, like many other devices, become part of this beautiful thing that we call the Internet of Things. So they're not only washing your dirty laundry after your sports session, but they're also constantly producing data that they produced before as well, but now they share it. So who owns this data? Is it you because you carried the laundry machine there? Is it the manufacturer because they created that sensor that would somehow, send data and they created this Internet of Things application? And you might think that is completely irrelevant because who cares about the data that laundry machines produce? But I chose this example for a specific reason. So below the drum of a laundry machine is a sensor that is so sensitive that when the laundry machine is not running, can actually feel seismographic movements. So imagine you have a network of laundry machines that's connected to the internet that is super interesting data. Because you could have early warning systems that the government could provide, you could have some researchers that actually look at this data to understand our world a bit better, or you could have some companies that come up with cool, new insurance schemes or whatever based on that. If we like that or not is a different question. And I want to make very clear that what I'm talking about is non-personal data, because for personal data we have a pretty comprehensive regulation, which is called the GDPR, DSGVO, which really already, I think, is a huge step for Europeans to have the right to their own data. But it's about the non-personal data. So the European Commission realized that there is around only 5% of industrial data currently shared. 5%. That's not a lot. That means there's 95% that could still be shared, but it's not shared. And here we come to the core of the question of the Data Act and the Data Governance Act and why we have these regulations. Because there are many, but I would say 3 main issues why this data isn't shared. The first one is that everybody is being told that data is gold or oil or soil. There are beautiful ideas of what to call it. But it basically means that whoever has data holds on to it. Because you feel that like if you have it and it's worth gold, you should be able to somehow turn it into cash. Yeah? And that's the motto of this conference. But that obviously means that whoever holds onto this tries to be a gatekeeper and is not intrinsically motivated to share it. The second issue is legal clarity. I mean, is it you that owns the laundry machine that can share this data? How do you even get access to this data? Like, if it's flowing out of your device, like, can you sell it on a data marketplace? Can you just divert it somewhere, and how do you get access to it? And the third question is actually the question of the data marketplace. We currently do not have intermediaries that are functioning like big stock exchanges where data, real-time data is being traded or old data sets are being traded. There is a couple of them, weather markets or weather data markets, and some niche other ones. And I think if you want to get rich, you should found a data market. So if you feel like this is your goal and you know how to code or you know someone how to code that knows how to code, found a data market because this is coming. So these are the 3 issues. There's like a lack of data markets, there's lack of legal clarity, and there are people holding on to data that don't want to share it because they don't see the societal or economic benefit, at least that they could get from it right away, and they're told that data is gold. So the first law that I worked on, and that is already decided and will hopefully come into force quite soon, is the Data Governance Act, and it really tried to ensure that the data intermediaries would work. So data intermediaries are these like stock exchanges, people that share, or like platforms that share data from an unknown number of sourcing providers, let's say providers of data, with an unknown number of recipients. And what we try to do is to ensure that all the power that we have in the data storage market, or cloud service providers, the market concentration that we have there, which is really extreme. So you have 3 companies who own 80% of the data storage market. That doesn't transfer back into the data intermediary market. And so we made a cut and basically said, you need to legally separate whatever other offerings you do from the data intermediary market. So that was the first law. So we hope that we will soon have these data intermediaries, these data stock exchanges. And the second law, and that is, I think, really crucial, is currently being negotiated, and I've never been lobbied in my whole life as much. Yeah, I think we counted with my assistant together at least 250 emails and positions that we got. We had really 1,000 of companies coming to us, and we see it's literally, especially the manufacturers, who are trying to stop this law from ever coming into force. Why? Because in this law, what we are trying to say is that if you own a device, you should be allowed to have access to the data that it produces. Not the in-device data, so not all the data that's going through this product, but the data that it shares to the outside world. And that very much goes against what's currently happening. I don't know who of you still owns a car or uses Miles or other car sharing companies, but at the moment, most of the data that connected devices produce is just going back to the manufacturers. And there's very often not even a contract at the basis of this. It's just flowing. It's just the de facto reality of what's happening. So what we're trying to do with the Data Act is to give you this right back. Not for personal data, because this is already done under the GDPR, but also for industrial data. That means giving this right back also to all the small and medium-sized businesses that might own machines. And the hope is that when we clarify that you're allowed to share this data and sell it on marketplaces, that we will have a liquid data economy and that we will actually be able to get from these 5% of data that's currently being shared to the 95 or even 100%, so that we have really new startups coming up and new ideas of how this would work. So to bring it back to the laundry machine, I mean, the idea would really be that you can share this data that comes out of your laundry machine, that we also democratize access. And this is the last point I want to make today. I mean, we talked about democratizing fashion before, but for me, it's really crucial that we make the value of data visible. It's not only because we would have a decentralized profit making of data, which I think is crucial if you think about AI and all the profit that will come out of it, so that everyone profits from this, but it's also crucial for competition. Because currently, competition law works on one thing only, which is turnover. So if you have a company that has a lot of power, but doesn't actually, and gets a lot of data, but doesn't actually make money with that data directly, you will never see what kind of power they actually have, and competition authorities will never be able to actually get into that. And we know that there are a lot of these services that are for free. If we actually allow everyone decentralized to share their data for a little buck, 50 cents for my monthly laundry machine data or whatever, the value of data becomes visible on the balance sheets of all companies, which would allow competition authorities to have a look what's actually happening. So even though this might be super nerdy and we're in a stage quite far away, I want you to understand that like this fight that's currently happening in the European Union of the manufacturers and people like me trying to maybe democratize data value is super crucial for the future data economy. I think it is as crucial as the GDPR has been for our personal data, for the industrial data. This is the core act that we should look at. And I wanted to just bring this back to you because it's about cash and it's about data, so I thought it fits well. So I would say if you have any questions about any of this, now is the time to ask. I think we have around 10-ish minutes left. There are microphones, so you can either go here or there, and then we can have a conversation about that.
I just needed a clarification. What do you mean by share? Share on the public domain? Share to the user? Share to a marketplace that will resell those data? What do you mean by manufacturers need to share their non-personal data? Thank you.
So you asked what you mean with manufacturer needs to share. It's very important that we are not telling manufacturers to do anything. We're just saying that when you own a product, a connected device that is sending data out, you as the owner of such a product should have the right to share that data. Who you share this with is completely up to you. You should be able to put it on your page and then it's like running and everybody can see it. You could be able to give it to researchers, to foundations, whatever, NGOs. You could also share it on the marketplace, and this is because I'm looking at this from an economic standpoint, crucial for me. Why? Because in the end I would like smart people who want to build a new application to be able to go to an investor and say, hi, give me 5 million euros. I want to buy for 4 million euros this kind of data, and then for 1 million I want to hire a tech, like an IT professional, to build an algorithm to offer a new service. Because currently innovation is really constrained in those who currently have the data, the incumbents. And I think if we want to be innovation friendly, we need to have more access to data that people share voluntarily on data marketplaces. I think there's another question there.
Will the data actually be owned by someone, or will it be part of the public domain?
So there was a huge debate about data ownership a couple of years ago, and it completely failed. Yeah? It didn't really work out. There's a reason that the people who are really interested in personal data say data ownership could create issues because it should be a fundamental right, and so the conversation derailed. So what I'm talking now about is actually just the access and sharing rights. So I want to make sure that even though you give someone access to your data that comes out of your device, because you often get back a service, you can start your laundry from far away on the app, and you're happy to be able to do that, and that's why you grant access to your laundry machine. But that still, yes, the company that is offering this remote service can get access, but that you also have access. And currently that's not the case. So it's about access rights for individuals, for companies who own connected devices.
No clarity regarding ownership and no assignment of ownership. Like, for example, the guy who actually bought the washing machine also owns the data or something like that.
I personally would very much like to go in this direction, but because of this very toxic debate, I would prefer to talk about access rights. So you have the access right and you can grant access right for services. And yes, it should be your right to share that individual data set that comes out of your device and get money for it. So whether you call this ownership, it's your choice. I will talk about access rights and sharing rights and monetization rights from the user's
But
perspective.
with options for compensation, what is pretty close to ownership, I would say. Yeah.
You are saying this now, I'm allowed to say this because we're in the middle of the debate and that would be difficult.
Since you are negotiating that anyway, you could do me a favor and put all this into the public domain so that all the companies who are also doing the sensors in the washing machine and the circuitry who are processing this data have a much larger pool of data to actually do product development and provide further use cases for the public.
I mean, what you're referring to, which is very interesting, is that in this lobby war that I explained to you, there is one group of people that are very much on our side, but they're quite silent because they're afraid. And these are the component manufacturers. So, like, imagine you have an airplane. An airplane, when it's sold, has a lot of components in it. But who currently holds the data is mostly the OEM, so the manufacturers that sell the final piece to Lufthansa or other companies. And the component manufacturers very often don't get that data. So obviously, if this data could be available, then a component manufacturer could also access it and buy it and improve their own product. So there's, I think, also in terms of market power and the current law of the jungle that we have, an improvement that we could see there. There's another question.
Thank you so much. My name is Linda from Kenya, and I'm curious about how you see Europe's place in light of this law across the world. One, in innovation, but then also two, on data flows. But then two, also a question on what you mentioned about competition authorities. How do you view the changing role of competition authorities and what they need to do at this point? Thank you.
I think I'll start with the second point. Competition authorities have realized that they have a huge issue. When they get active in a digital space, it's too late. The market is already concentrated. They can give fines, and they try in the European Union, as you might know, but it's already too late. Like all the competitors have died. The company that you're trying to regulate is already completely omnipresent and tries to connect other services that they have with what they're building. So competition authorities are currently too slow, and that's something that we also regulate in the Data Markets Act that was mentioned, to give them a bit more the chance to act faster. But I think with this law, with the Data Act, we would give them the chance to act a lot faster, because when, like in the early stages, when you currently act completely freely as a data kraken, if you want, you would now actually, it would be visible on your balance sheet that you're doing this, because you have to pay for the data that you get of these customers, if you want. And whether, a good question is, what kind of effects will this have internationally? The one point where I very much agree with the manufacturers, who are in the end the ones building the sensors and the connectivity into the product, into the device, is that they're afraid that certain trade secrets might be shared outside the European Union, but also within the European Union, and be lost. And so what we do agree on is that we need to somehow have a framework that safeguards also that no trade secrets are being disclosed unlawfully. So there's a bit of a balance and nuance there. How will it affect us? I think it will actually set another example, like the GDPR was an example of, your data, your personal data, your right. And this is like, if you want the second piece to it, your device, your ownership, your right to be compensated for the data that you co-produce. It's also the fact that because of your use, data is being generated.
I was just going to follow up and ask, and this is just from a user perspective, a user of technology. Does Europe want to set a standard, or as an example, or does Europe want to innovate and actually own product?
The question is whether the "or" is really, the right word. If you look at GDPR, what happened is that basically in the US we have an economy where the data is owned by businesses. In China, people say it's more like the government that owns most of the personal data. And in Europe, we established a new model basically saying, like, you own your personal data. It's not very implemented that great, to be honest. We all click yes all the time, if we can. But the basic philosophy behind it, I think, is really beautiful. And there are issues with it, but the basic philosophy of your data, your right, I think is crucial. And a lot of industry actually developed out of that. I recently, I think 2 weeks ago, spoke to a tech entrepreneur who is trying to build an algorithm that changes traffic data so that you can still use it to train algorithms, but the faces of people are changed in a way that you cannot recognize them anymore. So they're trying to turn the personal data and video footage into non-personal data to be able to use it. These are all innovations that are coming and that can be hugely beneficial for us, I think, in the digital age, also beyond what they are trying to do right now. So I think also with the Data Act, we will be able to obviously see changes, but hopefully a lot of new innovation, because we hopefully will get to liquid data markets that we really need to be able to allow all these new bright minds to come up with innovative ideas and not just the incumbents who currently sit on the data. Any further questions? Now is your, yeah, there's one.
If I understand correctly, you sell the data and then the company or person that bought it is not allowed to transfer it any further, right? So they can't also sell the data that they have, or are they allowed to? Is it kind of an exclusive access rights, or is it not? And if you are allowed to, not allowed to resell the data, how do you regulate that data flows aren't happening with the companies or people that buy the data?
So in my view, if you look at the data economy or data market, it should be in a way similar to a financial market, which means that data flows of individual laundry machines should be able to be aggregated, analyzed, sold on, and there could be multiple stakeholders, multiple actors in that chain. So yes, I think it would make sense that if you have the right to share that data, you can also share this exclusively with one. I mean, this is completely up to you. Or you can say, please feel free to sell it on, I don't really care. I mean, this is should be up to you. And I think if that works, then hopefully we will have that data economy. And I didn't really get your concern then.
Yeah, how do you then regulate that? Because we don't have the ownership, it's kind of this de facto control that people have, and you don't really see when data flows are happening from the outside, right? So if you buy the data and have it, and then you just share it with others, how do you regulate that?
So I think here I would differentiate between past data sets, so basically data sets that are finalized, and real-time data. And I think real-time data is really the one element where we could see a lot of interesting things happening, because then if you connect real-time data, I mean, there are funny ideas. For example, if you look at the data that windmill produces, so like the wind speed, for example, close to 3 more minutes, the wind speed close to airfields. This data could actually be used by the airplane operators, so like the airlines, to reduce the amount of counter throttle they need when they land. Because at the moment you have the maximum amount of fuel that you push out in the moment that you actually land on the airstrip or airfield. So there is value to be created, and that's real-time data that you need. In the sense of how we regulate, for me, from a regulatory perspective, the first thing I want to clarify is, can the windmill owner share this data with the airline provider? And that's basically all I'm looking at. Or is it only the manufacturer that created that windmill who should have access to that windmill and be able to do that interaction? So that's what I'm looking at. How, I mean, once you have sold your data, if it's past data, you have given up the ownership right of it, or like the access right, if you want. If it's non-personal data, very crucial, yeah? And so, I mean, whatever you write in the contract that you sold it with, then should be
But that's
happening.
kind of the problem. If you don't have the ownership and only the access, and then you have the right, there's no control over it anymore, right? So the person can just share it that has it. Like, do you know, you give the control away? I mean, it's a follow-up question, isn't it?
I think if you pass on the access and sharing rights to a second person, then this person also has the access and sharing rights, and you gave it up. Yeah? So that obviously means that this is happening. This is for past data. For real-time data, you will always have to have service contracts over time that you can step back from, because it's an ongoing relationship, a contractual relationship that you have. Sadly, my time is up, but I hope you enjoyed this very nerdy talk about laundry machines. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them anytime, and thanks a lot for your attendance.